When it pertains to the realm of animals, cats stand out as remarkable parents. Therefore, when a cat chose to adopt a tiger cub, its exceptional caregiving abilities came to the forefront. However, several years later, an unforeseen event transpired, leaving everyone utterly astounded. Arthur, a passionate camping enthusiast, found immense joy in immersing himself in nature. Frequently, he embarked on journeys from his residence in a Russian city to the neighboring mountains, where he would establish his campsite and relish multiple days amidst the untamed wilderness. Camping was not just a source of amusement for Arthur, it also provided him with a precious opportunity to unwind and rejuvenate away from the demands of his hectic city job. With only solitude and serenity enveloping him inside his tent, it truly epitomized Arthur's vision of paradise. Being immersed in the world of finance, Arthur's typical workdays involved an onslaught of frantic phone calls, relentless pursuit of financial transactions, managing investments, handling cash deposits, monitoring stocks, and an overall state of constant business. Thus, the tranquil escape camping provided served as a much-needed respite from the bustling pace of his professional life. Immersed in a high-pressure, fast-paced environment, Arthur couldn't deny his love for it. However, the allure of seeking solace amidst the silence of the wilderness provided the perfect antidote to alleviate the stress and pressure that accompanied his daily life, even if only temporarily. But on one fateful day during a camping expedition, an extraordinary event unfolded, surpassing all expectations. This event, which held the power to transform Arthur's life forever, remained shrouded in mystery. As Arthur sat outside his tent, tending to a small crackling fire, engrossed in a book, and savoring a sip from his flask of coffee, the answer to this remarkable and almost unbelievable occurrence beckoned, leaving viewers captivated and eager to discover the extraordinary truth. Arthur heard a noise, a sort of whining, high-pitched moaning noise. Arthur had spent a lot of time up in these mountains, and he had never heard a noise like that before. So he was understandably curious and interested as to where it was coming from and what it might be. Putting down his flask and book, Arthur cautiously headed off in the direction that the sound was coming from. It certainly was tricky to pinpoint the origin of the noise, as the trees were dampening the sounds. Also, the bounders were reflecting the sound and making it bounce from all different directions. But eventually, Arthur rounded a corner and saw something that made his mouth drop wide open. There, laid on the ground in front of him, were two tiny tiger cubs. They were no more than a few weeks old and looked terribly helpless and defenseless. Being a cat lover, Arthur's first thought was to scoop them up and take them somewhere safe, but he knew that they must have a mother somewhere. Perhaps she had gone to bring some food, or maybe she was close by keeping a sharp eye on Arthur. Whatever the case, Arthur left the cubs where they were, though he kept returning to check on them throughout the rest of his camping trip. But what became very evident was that no one was coming for the cubs. There was no mother, and the cubs really were helpless when Arthur noticed how painfully thin they were. He knew he had to act, so he packed up his camping gear and scooped up the two mewing tiger cubs. He would take them home and try to care for them himself. Arriving at home, Arthur walked in to find his cat Princess ready to greet him. She was a beautiful little cat who had given birth to several litters of kittens before. Arthur loved Princess with all of his heart, and being able to sit with her on an evening and stroke her was another one of those things that helped him decompress after his long and busy days. But when Princess saw the two tiger cubs, she was immediately curious. She looked from the cubs to Arthur as if to ask what they were, where they came from, and why they were there. Arthur had no time for introductions, though he knew that he had to get some food into the cubs as soon as possible. If they had any chance of surviving, Princess watched on as Arthur fed the viewing cubs several slices of meat and let them lap up an entire bowl of milk. And that's when Princess did something truly astonishing. She walked over to the cubs and started grooming them with her tongue. Despite the cubs being the same size as the cat, Princess knew that they were youngsters and as such needed looking after. It was as if Princess's mothering instinct had been clicked on, and she fell into the role as if she did this kind of thing every single day. Over the next few weeks, the tiger cubs grew stronger and healthier. Their weight returned and they began to have more energy. Princess would look after them and the cubs would follow her around. As if they just accepted their new roles as princess kittens. She would groom them, encourage them to eat and drink and run and play with them before all three animals curled up together and fell asleep. As time went by, the tigers began to grow physically. They became longer, taller, and heavier than Princess, and still Princess treated them as if they were her own little baby kittens. When they would become a little too rough, when play fighting, Princess would run across and lay down the law, sending the tiger cubs apologetically scattering in two different directions. It really was an amazing thing to see, and it never failed to make Arthur laugh when he watched his tiny little cat absolutely dominate the two giant tigers. Sadly though, the day came when the tigers were too big to live with Arthur anymore. They were getting to be a huge handful, and would often damage things in the house, not intentionally of course, but things were still getting broken and smashed, and not only that, but feeding them was costing Arthur a fortune too. So he made the decision that he would take them to the local zoo and ask them to look after them from now on. Strangely though, as he packed them into the back of his car, Arthur felt a great sadness, especially when he saw the sad look on Princess's face as they drove away. Luckily, the zoo was happy to accept the tigers. They had recently created a wonderful, large new compound where the tigers could run and play in an environment very similar to their natural environment. There was even a large perspex window where visitors could come and watch them as they played, and so, after saying his goodbyes, Arthur left the tigers in the very capable hands of the zoo staff. He had done all that he could. He vowed never to return to the zoo in case he felt an intense amount of guilt for leaving the cubs behind, and for several years he stuck to that vow. But years later, Princess became sick. She was getting old, and her body was not able to fight off illnesses as it once was. Arthur took her to the vet, and they told him that it would be for the best if they euthanized her. Arthur sadly agreed, but there was one thing that he wanted to do first, one final treat that he wanted to give Princess, and so he headed to the zoo, unsure of what he would find there. With Princess snugly secured in a carrier cage, Arthur made his way through the gates and headed towards the tiger enclosure. As he arrived, he immediately recognized the two tigers he had rescued years ago. Peering through the transparent perspex window, the tigers cautiously observed Arthur, uncertain if they remembered him. In a gesture of familiarity, Arthur extended his hand towards them, as if attempting to stroke their majestic forms. However, the tigers glanced at his hand and then turned away, seemingly regarding him as a stranger among the countless visitors they encountered daily. Arthur, disappointed by their apparent lack of recognition, withdrew his hand and proceeded forward. Little did he know that an extraordinary and unbelievable event was about to unfold before his eyes. Arthur lifted Princess, his cat, and presented her to the tigers. Instantly, the two tigers lit up with delight, bounding towards the cat and expressing affection through gentle pawing at the glass and joyful rolling on the floor. The memories of the animal who had nurtured and safeguarded them for years remained vivid in their minds, and it was evident that Princess recognized them as well. Arthur marveled at this inexplicable connection, considering how much the tigers had grown since they last parted ways. Yet, Princess instinctively knew that these magnificent creatures were her offspring, perhaps guided by scent or some enigmatic animal instinct beyond human comprehension. Princess pressed her small body against the window, gazing at her children, who reciprocated the desire to be close to their mother. Witnessing this profoundly emotional reunion melted the hearts of all present. While Arthur harbored doubts about the tigers' ability to recall their upbringing or the time before their arrival at the zoo, it was unmistakable to everyone that they still held immense love and affection for their mother Princess. It just goes to show that even though Princess and the tigers weren't even the same species, love is love, and a good deed will stay in the memories of all for a long time. And for that brief moment, everything was all right with the world. Now it's your turn. What are your thoughts on this amazing and heartwarming tale? Let us know in the comments section. Thank you.